Good afternoon, fellow citizens. Welcome to the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Masesa Demiano, and today we're going to have a very interesting discussion. We're going deep into the budget deficit. We're also discussing the public debt, and many other more. So today I'm joined by a serious panel of experts, and right in there on my panel, I have one guest, and there are little changes in the panel setup because of some technicalities. But yes, we're good to go. Our guest today is Sophie Nampewo. She's the expert, policy expert with CSBAG, and our regular panelists, Sarah Bireete, the executive director with the Center for Constitutional Governance, and Ochieno Joseph, the UPC contestant. Thank you for showing up, and good afternoon, my panelists.
Good afternoon, viewers.
Thank you very much. I think straight into the discussion for today. Maybe I'll need to start with Sophie. Not because you're close to me, but just you need to set the pace for us. What is your take on the ongoing budget process in relation to the skyrocketing public debt?
Thank you, Demiano. And good afternoon, viewers, once again. Sophie Nampewo is my name, as earlier introduced. About public debt, first off, because of the discussion that's going on around town, there's been an ongoing discussion of every Ugandan is currently expected to pay 1.5 million as far as it stands, which is interesting, which is true, but then it's not like we are supposed to pay it today. So as far as our public debt stands with the ongoing budget discussions, the budget process is coming to an end for the next financial year, and from the projections we are seeing, our budget is going to go up. Right now, our public debt stands at 65.8 trillion, which is a huge sum of money, if you're to think about it. But this is spread over a period of time. So we have been accumulating it over a period of time, and quite a number of years. Although with what came through last year, which is COVID, it increased greatly. Between 2019 and 2020, our debt stock increased from, by the end of 2020, in December 2020, we were at 47.2%. That is our debt to GDP in nominal terms, how much we expected, the proportion we would expect to pay at that given time. Right now, as I speak, we stand, it has increased. I said it was 65 trillion, and that's an increase from 49 trillion. An increase by 49 trillion from where we stood before. And right now, of that debt, the external is about 42.6 trillion, what we've borrowed from countries, from different organizations out there. And part of it from within is 22.9 trillion. What we've been getting from the banks, what we've been borrowing internally, treasury bills and bonds. For those who are good at doing business and investing within government, they've been able to, they owe government that much. It might be a scare to us when you think about 65 trillion, but when you think about what it's supposed to do, it's supposed to benefit us as a country. Most of this debt is to infrastructure development. We all know we have road construction going on here and there. We have dams that are being set up. We're looking at a standard gauge railway, the construction or the works that are going on in the western part, in the Bunyoro area, where we are trying to work on our petroleum and oil and gas. All that is going on is hiking our infrastructure development, and that is partly what is driving our debt to the numbers that we see. Yes, in a nutshell.
Oh, thank you very much, Sophie. At least you try to put it into context. I don't know, Sarah, I would want to invite you to have a take on this.
Yeah, you know, budget processes are supposed to be driven by priorities in our national development plans. When you look at National Development Plan 3, we have 3 priority sectors of ICT, agriculture, and tourism. But when you look at the budget, I think the budget has no connection with our priorities as set in the National Development Plan 3. And this is a principle set in our Public Finance Management Act 2015 as amended in 2019. So we have a public finance management law that is not respected. We have a national development plan for 5 years that has set the priority sectors for the next 5 years that is ignored in the budget process. Yet the law demands, it's not ignored, but it's, you know, when you look at the money going in ICT, going in agriculture, going in tourism, you cannot convince any Ugandan that those are our priority sectors. And if somebody had not read the National Development Plan, and you look at the priorities in the budget, would you think the budget reflects the write-up in the National Development Plan?
It might not reflect, but I would like to make a slight correction. Agriculture, tourism, and ICT are drivers. But then the programs within the NDP3 that were set all have a contribution to our
Of course. What I'm saying, my point is that when you have these as drivers of economic development, then they should have a sizable investment for them to be able to drive the economy. Because how do they drive the economy? These are drivers of development for the 5 years. I know now, like ICT, there is a new tax on data. So is that how we are driving that economy? You will come in. You will come in. You will come in at that time. So my point is that if we have a national development plan for 5 years, where experienced people take time to define what we need to follow as an economy. In addition to that, we have a law which says the budget process must reflect what is captured in the National Development Plan. So if these are drivers of the economy, I don't know what percentage has been given, for example, to agriculture, that employs 80% of the people. So, but I know that for several consecutive years, we have fallen far below the Abuja blueprint in terms of investment in agriculture, of 10% requirement. So how then does agriculture drive the economy to get us out of the recession and decline and skyrocketing budget debt? That is my connection with the two. But also under Section 2 of the Public Finance Management Act, the law spells out the principles of our fiscal policy objectives. And I will read some of them. The first one is sufficiency in revenue mobilization. Second one is maintenance of prudent and sustainable levels of debt. The third principle is ensuring fiscal balance when calculated without petroleum revenues is maintained at sustainable levels. The fourth principle is management of revenue from natural resources for the benefit of current and future generations. We are not yet there. And the last principle under Section 2 of the Public Finance Management Act is consistency of medium-term expenditure framework to the NDP, efficiency, effectiveness, and value, ensuring value for money in our expenditures. And my question to the expert in the House would be, I know there has been a lot of political jokes, political debates about what Uganda's fiscal policy is, and maybe the viewers did not know the principles that are spelled out clearly in our Public Finance Act. So would you think that any of these principles is being followed.
I know she will answer that at some point in the second
So my
segment.
question is, are any of these principles of our fiscal policy objectives being followed? My answer is that not any single objective is followed beyond 30% implementation. So whatever is being followed in our budget planning processes and budget cycle, including monitoring and ensuring value for money, does not fulfill the principles of fiscal policy objectives in this country to the tune of 25%. It does not. Obviously, no, looking at budget deficiency, I think our revenue collection is now at 22 trillion as a country.
Expected for next financial year.
22 trillion. So when you have a budget of 44.3 trillion and you can only raise 22 trillion domestically, are you sufficiently mobilizing revenue? That is the first principle of our fiscal policy. Are you sufficiently mobilizing revenue? No, yes. Are you sufficient? Is that sufficient in revenue mobilization? Look at our debt. It is now at 49.2% of GDP. We are 0.8 shy. Yes, we are a few points shy of the red line set by international fiscal and monetary agencies of 50% of GDP. And if you maintain the borrowing and the borrowing appetite of this regime, within this year we are going to shoot over 50%. And that means that our economy as a country will be in the red line officially. The Auditor General in the last year's audit report was very clear on the dangers of borrowing and the adverse effects this excessive borrowing has on our economy. But also to apply common sense and look at really whether there is value for money in this huge debt that we are securing. Our expert, Sophie, did mention the infrastructure, but we also know that in most of these infrastructures, I saw an evaluation report by some engineers on the Nile Bridge construction, where many people thought that the costs were exaggerated to a tune of 60%. But if you look at the Entebbe Express Highway, which is the second most expensive road in the world, so you need to ask, as much as we are borrowing to do infrastructure projects, is there value for money? Is there efficiency? Is there prudent, following of procedures to ensure we maintain our fiscal balance as a country? And lastly, as I conclude, Section 3 of the Public Finance Management Act mandates the Minister of Finance to present a fiscal responsibility charter in Parliament within the 3 months of the new Parliament after election. I don't, and maybe our expert in the House will guide us, because CSBAG concentrates on budget and financial efficiency of the country, whereas for us we do work on broader governance. So we tend to talk in broader terms. But I would wish to see the Charter for Fiscal Responsibility, given the nature of the budget, the excesses contained in the budget. Just yesterday, the Minister of Finance, with his delegation, were told by the Budget and Finance Committee of Parliament to take back the budget, because after a little review of the line budget, finance budget, line budget, there was excess and wastage of 9 billion detected just in presentations. Yet the principle adopted in the budget, even given the adverse effects of COVID pandemic on our economy, was that we should eliminate wastage. But beyond that, the politics of our country with the elaborate patronage system at the moment, considering the bloated administrative expenditures of a huge parliament, 120 or more presidential advisors, districtization. Every village will soon become a district, and that comes with the costs. So I do not think that the current political leadership in this country has capacity to operate within the principles of fiscal policy objectives set in our laws.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was extensive, and I hope, Sophie,
No, she doesn't have to
when I
answer
get back to
everything.
you, you will need to answer to some of these. But I want to get to Joseph. Joseph, you're going to be, possibly if people give you their mandate, our next CIC.
They had better.
Yes.
Because fiscal prudence is UPC's second name.
So in there, I would want you to try to get to us and tell us, because then we would not want to see this in your next government,
There's no circumstance under which the mess of NRA in the last 35 years would ever be a part of a UPC economic program. And Sophie, watch the space and we'll have a serious conversation on this. Sophie, you've been very fantastic in trying to calm down the citizenry, having given this huge amount of money, trillions, in terms of public debt for our country, and the conversation ongoing for the 1.5 million Uganda shillings. Yeah, it can be very simplistic, and people shouldn't really worry about it. But it's a huge risk, huge amount of money. So you've helped calm down the people, but the implications are huge. Like Sarah suggested towards the end of her submissions, this country could come to a standstill. The cost of borrowing for us externally might become so exorbitant that Museveni's former old friends, IMF and World Banks, I know these days they go to China and other places, might simply say that you're too risky, in this context, you're too risky to lend a few shillings. Because one, you don't know how to spend it. Two, we don't know what you're going to spend on it. Three, you're not only a bad borrower. Four, you're possibly a thieving borrower. And five, you're not a mandated borrower. My sister-in-law, Betty Kamia, a few years ago when we agreed on more things, gave a submission in which she did fantastic stuff. I hope I could be able to get a copy of her submission a few years ago. And Betty, since it's a national conversation and you're part of the top echelon of the regime, we could share around this topic. And that was a historical context of how much debt this country has had since independence, how much borrowing various governments, including Museveni's and Ali's friend and Gaddafi's friend, Idi Amin, how much they borrowed systematically. And Amin excelled rather well compared to these guys. Betty was still making a submission, but much more importantly was how much grants, how much money, and this is about 10 or so years ago, how much goodwill money this regime has had from the international community. Huge amount of money. And then you look at the context broadly of Betty's own submission about 10 years ago, and you wonder, part of what Sarah is suggesting, what have we been borrowing so much for? Yesterday, I was lucky to have a quick conversation with somebody in government. As by the way, the person would have been lucky if we were seated. And it was about how messy these guys do when it comes to public services. And I consoled him that while I recognize in the last 10 or so years, there has been investments in infrastructure, I would want to suggest that perhaps, as Sarah seems to indicate, suggest that maybe this is a new way of thieving money, public money. Let's borrow from China, for argument's sake, 1 trillion, build a highway to Nagongera, but the 1 trillion, the highway could cost 200, 20% of that. The guys who did the deal take another 20%. Another 20 goes maybe into electioneering, for which the figures don't add up. And the other 20% is what is necessarily what the Damians and their grandchildren will pay for. These debts will have to be paid by our children and children's children at some stage, Sophie. The last time we had mini so-called debt relief was about 15 or so years ago, and I was campaigning. Actually, I was part of the Jubilee 2000 debt relief campaigns. And for me, my debate at the time, argument at the time, was that I rejected that any money borrowed by the then NRA regime, a future UPC government, or for us as Ugandans, should pay back, because it was money borrowed by illegitimate guys and lent by wrong guys. So these regimes were literally being fighted off, but that slightly went away. In the interesting way, somehow debt relief came. Museveni, on coming to power, sang of how much he found empty treasuries, but the Sophies would go into the figures and actually contemplate the fact that actually how much money was there, or how much debt did we have? How much and how did we accumulate this debt? Those are the questions. So, without necessarily going too much into the technicalities, and I'm deliberately trying to avoid it, this is in mini economics, for the purposes of the public consumption, it is really about whether or not the debt burden that this regime is putting onto them and to their children is one which is justifiable, one which is tangible, or whether or not it's another new opportunity of raising top money for top few individuals. It's extremely irresponsible. But just a final quick thing. If only most of this money is raised, this guy stole 20%, another 20% went in incompetence, and the other 60%, there is genuine efficiency in terms of performance. Literally, efficiency wouldn't come in, where there is corruption, that they're deliverables. And if only these monies went to agriculture, as Sarah suggests, and if only these monies went to tourism. ICT, I'm neither here nor there with it, very strangely enough, because for me, I actually think that the bigger thing, while it's extremely important, consider what has happened, that we actually need to invest more in genuine education in terms of skills build-up, and ensuring that particularly our young people get guaranteed opportunity into high-level quality education and sufficiently skilled to compete with fellow young people in East Africa, fellow young people on this continent, and fellow young people who are going to be able to engage with some of the other guys in the Indias of this world, so that ICT simply becomes the next backup. But granted, if there are three, is there sufficient investment in them? Is there active competitiveness? As of today, are we really, really, really competitive as an agricultural nation? We are not. If of the 40 or so trillion shillings we're talking about, I will not check the figures before this program, you will know how much of that money goes to security. What security? What security, fellow citizens, drones in this country? Drones? And drones for who? Drones for who? So these are the things. So Ugandans need to know this. And unfortunately, actually, even much as the parliamentarians were playing very, very good stuff yesterday-ish kind of stuff, actually they're not going to the details. The point is these guys need to be held slightly much more accountable than that. The figures need to be able to play. And like Sarah said, if a basic arithmetic overview, brings out 9 billion, tells you that you really do not need specialist auditors to go through these things. So this is a regime, a government by accident, but it's a government which is substantially deliberate. These guys know what they're doing. So some of these fudge figures are deliberately fudge figures, and they're political, to the extent, therefore, that I hope that this debate gets slightly much more serious, so that we're able to hold these guys slightly much more accountable, and to do so sooner.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joseph. I think you've been speaking in presidential terms. No, Sophie, you started your engagement on calming our nerves down as citizens and the public. Then the issue of the NDB3 came in, and you see the budgeting has tourism, it has ICT, it has agriculture as priority, but these are not reflective in the budgeting. You see they are sidelined in the budgeting process. So what do you have to say about this?
I won't say they are sidelined. Yes, the proportions are smaller than the others, but what's going to them doing? I'll start with ICT. ICT is important, yes, for connectivity and also helping us move quite a number of things. But from the ICT part, government has played its part. The fiber cables have been set. I think, if not all across the entire country, it's 3/4 across the country. Those are supposed to increase connectivity. And what peaks from the fiber cable is private sector that's doing that. The MTNs, the liquid telecoms, to provide the internet service. Where Honorable talked about the skilling that is necessary for everyone to be able to make use of the ICT. And it's unfortunate that costs are also still high, that still need to be worked upon. But once that is managed, then it can improve connectivity and the use for us to get as much benefit from it as we should.
Can I say something
But-
very briefly, specific submission to that?
Okay, yes.
It's actually very interesting on the question of ICT, considering the context of the conversation around budget deficit and burdens. You know, responsible governments should actually invest. So if we are borrowing this money and ICT is a priority, then you're absolutely right. At what stage do the MTNs of this world take over? And then we still have to go ahead and pay the other taxes. Do you know what really other governments do? And I follow them very well, very much. You know, what other governments do would be to invest as much as possible, including giving subsidies, so that the citizens pay very little. And if only when they're able to do that or nothing, is the connectivity question you're raising, then one which benefits the citizen.
I'm sure with time we'll get to a point where, I can't say when, maybe in your government, we'll get to a point where we'll have those services really, really cheaper than they are now. But with where our country is, they're still high, which limits usage, which is right.
I think it's the
And-
highest in East Africa, our internet
I'm not so
rates.
certain.
Yeah, but at least Tanzania is much lower and they've further lowered. the
And I'm
internet
sure we
access.
will also get there. With the fiber cabling, it should be able to go down. Because the cost, at least everyone, wherever you are, you're able to access internet for most places within the country.
Yeah, but how does
It might not be
that-
as fast, but
How does that, Sophie, how can that become a reality when we are increasing taxes for the telecom companies, for data purchase? How can we lower the internet costs when we are coming in with the new taxes? Cables alone, are they a solution? Or it's a combination
no, the
of
cables
factors?
are not a solution alone. That is where government and private sector have to work together. Because government is not going to provide internet services.
But government should lead.
It has led with enabling you to be able to connect.
They
With the
should also
fiber
regulate
cabling,
and make sure
government
the
has
private
led.
companies don't rip off citizens.
Unfortunately, we are free market economy. Unfortunately. But government is supposed to provide the enabling areas. And I'll move slightly from ICT to agriculture.
Yes.
Providing information, I will say there's still a challenge in that. Market information, prices, where do I get quality standards, quality inputs, fertilizers and all. Where do I sell my produce? How do I manage my produce not to go bad? We are having challenges with our neighbors for our maize because of the aflatoxins. But that's partly from the storage that we don't manage well. I know there are still gaps that government needs to close up in that, especially with the post-harvest handling. And slowly strides are being made to make that happen and improve on our produce as a country. Market information, these are still gaps, but there are areas that have been identified that they will come up to work upon as we improve our sector. But I wanted to go back to the discussion of debt. Debt is not bad. Everyone at one point or another, you will borrow, let me say 500 shillings, 1 million, 2 million, because there are shortages. That is why we borrow. Unfortunately for us, we've never had a surplus as a country. There are countries that have surpluses, but Uganda as a country has not had a surplus. And what does that mean with our expenditure? It means we need to get somewhere to get this money from. That is why we end up going and borrowing. There are challenges, yes, we've had discussions about this, and it's basically not about us borrowing. It's majorly, what do we use this money for? What do we spend this money on? Is it for the right reasons? Is it not? Do we plan better for the borrowing or not? Unfortunately, what we've seen coming through is our planning is not the best for some of these investments that we undertake that lead us to borrowing. I'll use an example of last year we had to pass a supplementary. This year we had to pass we presented a supplementary budget to get planes, the Uganda airplane, which is good. Uganda Airlines, sorry, not Uganda Airplane, which is good, but at what time do we bring it? I think those are things that we need to look at. What is our appetite leading us to? Right now, we welcome our new members of parliament, and I know it's tradition. They come in, we buy them vehicles, make them comfortable, they have tablets, which is a good thing for their work, but it is an expense. And sometimes we need to think about some of these. We are in a situation where the world is facing a pandemic. We are trying to cut down on our expenditures, and we need to think of new vehicles for our MPs. These are expenditures that lead us to think about what we are borrowing our money for. Going back to our debt, it's unfortunate for what we've borrowed. We've had, sometimes there are slow disbursements of our funds that make us spend our money wrong, if I'm to use that term. When the money comes in late, sometimes what you've planned to do is delayed. And the debt that we get is not going to wait to have the costs that come with it. They will not wait for you to start utilizing your money when it has come in at the right time, because sometimes also the disbursements are from our side, the administrations. Are we ready the time we get it? So it increases the cost on debt in terms of our interest payments that have to start early. If we are not using the money as we should, we are already paying for the money itself, which puts us at a cost. So the administrative issues, the disbursements of funds, the project implementation itself, we've come to realize some of our projects that we borrow for, we've not been prepared for in terms of feasibility studies have not been done. I'll use an example of the Northern Bypass. If we had done it well the first time, we would not be doing it again now. That is a cost to us.
Did you read my article on Northern Bypass? Fantastic.
No, I didn't, unfortunately. Much as it is a good investment, our planning makes it a cost to us. We have delayed procurement processes. Sometimes the money comes and then we have to find a contractor who is going to do it, and it takes time. These are from our side that are becoming a cost to us in terms of debt, which also contribute to the 65 trillion that we are seeing, it growing. In some instances, it would have been lower if we had managed some of these. What we've,
and we have 1.3 trillion dormant loans for which we are
that
servicing.
are not being used, yes, that are not being efficiently used. And that leads me to what I was going to say. Currently, government is trying to see how they review they are reviewing actually some of these projects that have come through that we've borrowed on. Some have not been implemented well. Some are coming to the end, and we've not actually started implementation. So looking into these to see which projects are working well, which ones are not working well, and why. And we see, do we ask for a revision? Do we seeing how to correct some of these gaps to make it more efficient, but also to make it for us to, to get value from our money that we borrow, putting it to good use at the best time, and achieving the development that we want.
Thank you very much.
One last thing.
Okay.
One last thing about, it's unfortunate, and moving to the discussion that we had about the World Banks and IMF thinking twice about giving us our money. Our borrowing appetite has led us to move from the comfortable concessional loans to the,
Commercial.
I'll call them uncomfortable and non-concessional loans because they are commercial. We are paying high interest rates.
Yep.
For example, what we are borrowing from China compared to what we will get from IMF. IMF will give you a longer grace period. You will pay at a very low interest rate, and you pay over a period of time, and most times these are developmental. Unfortunately, because of our thought of we have to have it now, we're not able to.
The political decision. Yeah.
I was refraining from that, but yes. Because of those political decisions, we've had to have infrastructure investments that are really heavy, and we've not been able to phase them out well, that they are taking a toll and increasing pressures on us as a country. Whereas if we were able to space them, phase them out, and doing a better feasibility studies as we should, we would be able to implement better and not have as bad, I won't call it bad, it's growing and getting scary, but it's not bad, debt burden.
So in this budget, we have 20% to be into interest servicing the loans.
Sarah, I'm coming.
Yes, yes.
I'm coming there.
Not
Right,
20.
okay. Right there, Sarah. She argues that borrowing is okay. And of course, everyone argues,
At
yes,
one point
that
in time.
borrowing is okay. But you see, the fiscal year beginning July, I think, the country is expected to pay the 20, is it, you're saying 15? The 20%,
payment.
yeah, of all the planned domestic revenues to repay interest rates and this public debt, which is not sustainable, of course. What do you think?
You know, I was looking at my young sister, Sophie, to trying to justify and remain technical and avoid even mentioning political responsibility where it's one thing. I think it's important to note for the viewers and general citizens in Uganda that the politics drive the economy. The leaders that take critical economic decisions in this country are politicians. And we should not feel burdened to mention that, or even to mention the fact that our politics are upside down and they cannot get the economics correct, because that's how governance works. The decision makers are politicians. You can have technocrats, very good people like Sophie. Really, she's hands-on on her field. But for some of us who are working on governance and politics, we know that however good the technical people are, and Uganda has a number of highly qualified people in the fields of finance. So it's not lack of knowledge or skill. It's the politics that are wrong. And we should not feel shy or apologetic about it, because that's a fact that you cannot change. But going back to the debt, as much as borrowing is part of life, but we also know that it's possible for people to live within their means, or even when they borrow in a prudent and sustainable manner, as demanded by the principles of our fiscal policy objectives. That's principle number 2. So when you have a debt that is not, a growing public debt that is not sustainable, I think that's a matter of fact, even recognized by the Auditor General of this country. So it's not propaganda, no. Our public debt levels are no longer sustainable. So we do not have monetary prudence to ensure sustainable levels of debt in this country. That is not propaganda, and we shouldn't feel shy about it. Because if we hide facts and we try to cover them up, then they will not be solved. Because this is space for citizens, so that citizens are able to also tell their leaders why they think leaders are out of order. So going from that, personally, if you look at, once you have a country that is running on patronage network, and I want to give a simple example of COVID stimulus funds at UDB, Uganda Development Bank.
Oh dear.
Yes, these were funds that were supposed to help the small business enterprises, small and medium businesses enterprises, to maintain steady cash flow amidst COVID pandemic. But where did the money go to? The money went to the politically connected people. Even the politicians are linked to the money. Things in Uganda, it's like the jobs, the scarce jobs, and the little that are available that are given on technical know-how basis. The same technical know-how basis that controls our employment capacities extend to critical sectors, like UDB giving money to keep afloat the small and medium enterprises amidst the pandemic, and money goes to the rich that are not specifically squeezed. Because we know that as much as there is economic recession, a person who is in the 1% capacity of having attained, the hierarchy of needs in society, our 1% population that is in that self-actualization scale, they cannot be affected like the struggling people that are referred to as immediate poor, the people that are struggling to enter middle income and they can easily fall out of middle income. The impact is not the same. And these funds were supposed to help this category of people that can immediately fall. It is just a slip of a moment that they are either in lower, middle income, or they are in poverty.
They are poor.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So these are the people that the country is supposed to help keep going. And we know that in an economy, once you have a shrinking domestic base, then you cannot have a sustainable economy. Because the cycle of economic stability is clear. You must first empower citizens and ensure that the citizens have, welfare means and a little surplus for tax. Then you tax this surplus to do proper service delivery and regulation. And then the money comes back to empower the citizens. And as you grow household economy, you are growing a domestic base and you are growing a national economy. But we do not have this kind of intervention in this country. All we think about is borrow money, spend it. Sarah, Sarah has been calling the State House switchboard. What is her problem? I need a relief of 200 million. Are you able to keep quiet for 2 months? Then you can get a bailout. But I'm just giving that as a hypothetical.
but it happens if you want to qualify.
Now you know why.
I know why.
You can say no comment.
And these are borrowed funds for which me and you and our children and grandchildren are going to pay back. This is wrong.
Joseph, you have something to say on this.
I just wanted to say that I am delighted to say that I think was it 1984. It would be a very long time for you. Within like 3 years, Sophie, check your records. UPC managed to have a balanced budget. I really don't have the figures. I don't think I was much prepared today with the facts and figures, including the trajectory since independence, in terms of the figures where I was referring to my good sister-in-law, Betty. But I can tell you, as we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, and really, really still back at the heart of today's conversation, this excess and sustainable debt. It is really around the question of fiscal prudence. Fiscal policy programs, we were having early conversations, but it's really about how governments, young economists, how governments use, resources generated, balance around taxation and everything else, how much money is coming from agric, how much little money is going to come from these guys we abuse and call cheo, how much burdens of responsibility we think we have for that year and over the next year, how are we able to balance what to spend on and what not to spend on. The problem with this country is that for the last 35 years, we've never had an accountable government. Nobody elected Museveni to government. And I keep on saying this, and it's not really about making political capital. It is this. Sarah, this very topic we're discussing, there is no way in which a government, in a normal democracy, and Mr. Museveni, it, in a normal democracy, would see the end of the day if they would not have put on program. This would be our project, this is also Ministerial Budget Council. This would be our budgetary provisions for the following year. And experts like Sophie's would critique them. Media chiefs like the Masesas would put pumps onto them and make sure that they meet the climates with it. And if they don't, you're put to task. So meaning really, problem, fellow citizens, this, that normally these are matters that political parties and political leaders are questioned and tested by the citizenry. And they say, Masesa's programs sort of make sense. You know, we shall invest in health and education and ICT, says Sarah and group. Masesa asks, where will you get the money from? You know, and Sophie says, how shall you be able to do that considering the level of data? How will you be able to reduce? So these are topical conversations that normally take place prior to these conversations. In NRA, they haven't had it. It's just come and brought it to Parliament because, you know, they don't consult anybody. You know, these were not matters of national elections. During the election campaigns, instead of actually critiquing manifestos of political parties and organizations, you know, people were enjoying tear gas. You know, the tear gas that we're going to pay for anyway, kind of stuff. So that's one. Number two, you also know that some other political leaders, and I don't want to go too much in it, subjects of what fiscal policy and programs were. People made fun out of it. It was rather unfortunate. But these are important. These are important questions. You know, if you're a political leader, you ought to know. If you're a parliamentarian, merely a parliamentarian, you ought to know. Because what about if you went to a parliamentary select committee responsible for parliament committee on the public finance or something like that? You know, by and large. So these are the problems. I think Uganda today is running like a mini kind of accident. These guys, I repeat, know what they're doing. The problem is, Sophie, whatever we are talking about today is unfortunately a one-man show. Things are being fighted in a manner in which the citizens who have the burden to pay that 1.5 million shillings, and that's not little money, you know, on average. Because I know today in my own home village, I know people who cannot afford 1,500 for the next 1 week, and their families. They can't. And they possibly do not expect to get a 5,000 shilling new note in the next 1 month. Those people's names are linked to the 1.5. So it's very important. But anyway, so really, I think that the more we have these conversations, I hope the citizens, and thank you, Demian, and your program, for having some of these topics and some of these things, that we need to be able to have more citizens to get involved, and people like Sophie to come and help us and do the figures. But Sophie, budgets, questions, and taxation, all these things are political issues. You technocrats can talk about it, and it's okay, as Sarah says, to say these are political questions, decision-making for politicians. In so doing, you'll be helping the citizens. Because the topic today is quite technical. Many people don't really understand it beyond the headlines, including sometimes some of our guys in some of the publications that you'll see the headlines, but the detail is really not there. But these things are real. These things are real. These things are going to have implications on whether or not we're able to borrow comparatively going forward tomorrow. And you made another very important point. Away from the IMFs and the World Banks, people sort of enjoyed and clapped for the arrival of the Chinas, and now we know that the Chinas are soon about to take charge of Northern Bypass. Let's talk about Northern Bypass. Yes, I wrote in my opinion piece the other year how Northern Bypass played it beat. Somebody planned that they want to, usurp the UPC program of 40 years ago about a Kampala-Oboto, do this thing, and 15 years later, they're breaking up the whole system. It's a shameful kind of thing, meaning that is now not even about taxes, but simply because of lack of planning. Why? Because people don't have accountability. Why? Because people don't have leadership. And why? Because nobody is able to say that the patronage master, that, look, guys, what happened here? What are the implications for our citizens? So Ugandans are rather alone on these issues, but I hope, as we continue having this conversation, maybe by the end of this conversation, we shall have an idea how citizens can engage slightly more.
I want to pick up from that.
Yes, okay.
Yes, we are talking about debt, and there is misuse, yes, but debt is also helping us. Now let me bring it closer to the citizen. We are investing, government is investing, let me not say, I was taking myself as a Ugandan.
Yes,
but government is investing.
It's fine.
Government is investing in social services. I won't say they're 100% because there are some gaps in there, but there are social services, the health centers, the schools, majorly primary schools, even secondary schools. We've seen the U-Gift program, which is the universal intergovernmental government
agency.
No, it's not interagency. It's majorly bringing different, let me call them stakeholders together.
Okay.
It's a program that brings different let me say, water and sanitation, education, interagency, yes, programs. It's helping within the secondary schools, helping put the resources together to have more impact. So have hygiene catered for in there, have the education, the skilling catered for within the programs. That is a loan from the World Bank, and it's benefiting in terms of education for the students and pupils. Government borrows to provide these services. It's not to put in its own bag. But also in the next financial year,
for money?
in some places, yes. I won't say it's 100%.
Fair enough.
I won't say it's 100%, but there is value for money. In agriculture, there are still challenges within the storages, but there is improvement. Farmers are more coordinated. They are producing more. Our gap could be about marketing. How best can we coordinate our marketing process? And that is still work in progress. That government
In the most recent budget, do you have the figures for security sector, security and presence of
6.7.
Security?
Yeah, 6.7 trillion.
6.9 trillion.
Yeah, more than I thought. Okay.
Right there. I think let's have a short break. Let's have a short break and get back to this debate. This is an interesting debate that actually citizens should pay attention to. This is where most of you are much more interested. Those who are talking about the 1.5 public debt that you pay and your grandkids will pay. So this is a discussion. This is the area you need to be part and listen and possibly contribute, share your thoughts on our Twitter hashtag ChatShowUG. ChatShowUG. Kindly post your comments there, your reactions. Let's hear what you're saying. Also follow this debate. We are on live on YouTube, and we are here every Friday, 2 to 4, and also on Facebook. Kindly follow this discussion there and post your comments there. Let's hear from you. Let's join the debate. It's a free space for all of us as citizens. Thank you.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Welcome back from the short break. This is the Citizens Chat Show. And my name is Masesa Demiano, your host. I've been joined today by Sophie Nampewo from CSBAG. Sarah Bireete from the Center for Constitutional Governance, and Joseph Ochieno from the UPC. Yes, we are discussing the tax, budget deficits, and the public debt, of course. So, getting into the debate, I think I need to start with Joseph. Let's from the break. Let's go there. Do you think that we can reduce deficits while avoiding increase in tax rates?
Yeah, it can be done, and that's it. That's when we're having conversations, a joking conversation about fiscal policies and programs. It was not a joke. That sort of is real. That's where it is. Basically, I have 10 shillings in my pocket. What can I spend on it? But I also need some extra pocket change, and I also need to buy some, school uniforms for my kids. So what do? It's just something as basic as that. Then you prioritize and organize. You can simply tell your young son, young daughter, that you'll wait for the shoes and maybe in the next 6 months, battle on with this, or you go barefoot like Ochieno used to go in Nagongera before going to Mira and coming out and being better than some of the guys who now do the mathematics for the current budget. So it can be done. It's about prioritization, and in part I think that's what Sarah was saying at the beginning of the conversation. I don't know how you can say that you're running a government when it would appear that the clear object is about sustaining yourself. I mentioned in passing, sort of the nearest thing about quote manifestos. Those are really government programs which really directly answers your questions. Political parties and organizations, when they're preparing to go and solicit for votes, have programs that say, this is our tiny little package. If we came to power, this is what we will do. This is what we'll spend on. This is what we'll put down. This will be our top priorities. And in UPC's case, we would say quite clearly, 15.6% of our big money going to governance and security, would simply say, no, not as Ochieno watches, because it would not be, there is no reason why it should not be about 5%, for argument's sake. You know? And that's obvious comments. So it's viable. So there, you save more than 3 times agricultural budget. Think about it. It is possible.
Sarah?
Well, you see, budget as a key political tool should be determined by priorities that seek to empower the citizenry and develop the country. But when you look at, for example, the summer allocation of this budget, and if you went on a random sample of an ordinary citizen in this country and ask them how they think this budget will impact on them, I don't know. I'm Sophie, who works on the budget all the time. I don't know really what response you would get. We can sit here and argue that government does service delivery, you know, the health centers, up to health center 2 in some parts and health center 3. But during a quick assessment of preparation for COVID pandemic, it was very clear on the capacities of these hospitals, and it was quite shocking. It was quite shocking to know that even regional referral hospitals do not have oxygen. It was quite shocking to know that at the height of the pandemic, people contracted to deliver oxygen to Marago and other hospitals. We know what the finding was. Quite shocking. And we know that we lost 2 prominent doctors who were put on oxygen that was not working. So this is the extent of budget wastage that we are talking about. The extent of unseriousness of our political leadership. And the lack of accountability and responsibility on their part, on the people who govern this country. As much as we agree with Sophie that debt per se is not bad, but debt to do what? Mm-hmm. As a family, if you seek to mortgage your house, what are you planning to do as you mortgage your house? Because you risk to have your children with no home. So as you risk to make your children homeless, what are you getting this money for? I think those are the hard questions that our leadership should ask themselves before they sign up these loans, including dormant loans, for which we pay, we service every year as taxpayers. So, but are these hard questions being asked? I don't think so. And then when the money comes in, and people go all over the country distributing envelopes, whose money are they distributing? Mm-hmm. Distributing envelopes on rallies, distributing envelopes on the roads. I think it had reached an extent of even distributing biscuits at one time on the roadside. Whose money is being spent like that? And is there a value for money for a taxpayer? I think these are the hard questions that we need to answer and ask and demand for answers as citizens of this country.
Thank you, Sarah. Sophie, do you think we really can can reduce this deficit but also avoid increase in tax rates?
We can work on reducing it, and I'll pick up from where Sarah has ended. Issues around wastage are areas that we need to look into. We need to check ourselves. Where are the leakages? Where are the gaps? Where are we misusing the money? Why would we, at this point, and well, it should have been done earlier, but right now it's good for us to start checking ourselves. Why have we gotten a project that's not being implemented, and yet we are paying interest on? So for us to clean house, let me call it clean house, and check ourselves where the gaps are, that will help us improve and benefit from our debt, but also we'll be able to come to a point and say, no, this is not going to bring us much. We check ourselves before we borrow, thinking through, having the feasibility studies, and doing the calculations as they can be, because we have the knowledge within the country. It's just that sometimes we're compromised with different wants and needs. Someone thinks my people need to get this right now, yet sometimes it can wait. thinking through some of those so that we see which is going to bring us the highest return. How are we going to get our return from investment? So you're able to compare. Let us provide extension services for our agricultural farmers instead of constructing a road in this place. Or let us not work on the national roads, let us fix the district, community and urban roads. So prioritizing, looking at how we close the leakages and weak points, reduce the wastages. So checking house. The good thing is we've been able to identify some of these. The Auditor General has highlighted a number of, there are projects that are not working. There is mischarge of funds. You charge on the wrong vote. You're having loans that are not being put to good use in a timely manner. So we see how to close these, and if we close them, then we are able to utilize our debt well. And utilizing our debt well goes into, do we need to borrow, asking ourselves, do we need to borrow now, or we can hold on to this and use what we have? The little we have is not enough, that is true. But we can see what we can borrow for and what can wait. So what can wait? Right now, if we can as a country, we would hold on to borrowing and first settle with what we have now. But that might be difficult because implementation might come to a standstill. But looking through, checking, asking ourselves 1, 2, 3, 4 times before we borrow, do we really need to borrow this money? And is it going to bring the return that we need? For example, the vaccines are right now necessary. So you saying that I won't borrow because my debt is high, you're risking your population. But then what else can we leave out at the moment to spend on so that the little that we have can go to what is crucial at the moment? Us having those questions and thinking through is necessary for us as a country.
I actually have a suggestion. Okay. We could, for instance, suspend this toothless parliament for 9 months. You know, yes, and yes, and we save lives in different ways. But on a serious note, your other side of the question of whether or not we could check on dates without necessarily raising taxes. Actually, for me, I'm much more the other way around. While date is an imperative of life, actually, high tax is not necessarily a bad thing. If you know that you're going to tax people pay their taxes, and their monies are going to be into the best used. I can tell you that my favorite countries, we are UPCs, you know, my favorite countries are Scandinavian countries. By and large, they're generally higher tax countries, but they're countries where, from human survival indices to everything else, they're actually top of the range. Yeah. Health services and name it, top of the range. So it is possible.
And also the economies
precisely.
Of the people.
So even if so
you can.
I would rather we had higher taxes, less debt, but better services. In my weekly column this coming Sunday, I have written something which is very, very painful. A Ugandan citizen died within the last 1 week. A civil servant, a public servant, husband, public servant, a relatively young mother, as a result of a bungled service in a major hospital in eastern Uganda, transferred to almost certainly a major hospital in Kampala, possibly mention it. This woman dies. The family has spent over 30 million Uganda shillings at the funeral services in Kampala within the last 2 days. People waited, and I was there, people waited for this woman's casket to come. And the casket was, you can effectively say, detained at death because some of the pending monies. How many families, Damien, in this country can afford to pay 30 million shillings, given a chance to do so within 1 month? There are not many. There's something criminal about the conversation we're having. But I just gave it an oversight. Come to think of it, it really needs to be put within the context of this, particularly when we're also discussing public services. If only there was some kind of miracle these guys are doing. And then the final thing, of course, Sophie, I don't know, where you were when these guys came to power. This nonsense about integrated, self-sustaining economy. We should be able to have a self-sustaining economy. And a self-sustaining economy is one in which you don't have to borrow excessively in order to survive. The economy should be able to sustain itself. We don't have to depend on China when the IMF, our former friends, are beginning to get rather jittery. And China, for which, as I said, we risk this Kampala here, may one of these days, be up for, not for sale, but really up for grab in the hands of the Chinese because of debt.
Yeah, if I may come in, Demian, this country came into power with some programs intended to help the citizens get out of poverty beyond the normal citizens, normal service delivery, including Entandikwa. Then it has been changing names. Every financial year it is given a new name. At one time, then you see microfinance, then you hear microfinance money missing, you hear teachers' money, shared by two families. Then they start circles, and now we are on parish model. The new name is now.
Beyond wealth creation? I'd stop thinking because I'm an old man.
We had a discussion before here, and it was on the parish model. Maybe
yes,
you could,
so the new name now, the new propaganda name is the parish model. And some of the efforts they are seeking, to take away the women economic program and merge into the general pool for people to access funds. So, and the estimate is 30 million per parish. But if you go in a parish, first of all, how many households are in a parish? So if you put money, that 30 million per parish, and then I think on average, a village has about 100 households. Yes, let's take the minimum size. If a village has 100 households, a parish has about 8 villages, minimum. So you have a parish with 800 households, and then you give them 30 million to do what? To do what? What can they do with that money?
The small roads in the community.
But I think it's not all households that would get.
No. Yes, but you have 30 million
The principle of it,
for
you have to have
800.
figures, yes.
800 households. How many, even if you chose to lend 10 households, 10 out of 800, then you will give each of these households 3 million. So, and we have the program of, this agriculture program of the president is 4 acres, 4 acres, 4 acre model, to earn a minimum of 20 million. That was supposed to have happened in 2019. Earning then. So let's assume you have a house and they can do the 4 acre model and you've lent them 3 million. What can they do with 3 million?
Can get inputs. But
you will come to it. But you see also, if you look at the margin then, 10 out of 800, then 3 million. Yes, 3 million, they can buy seedlings. But maybe seedlings and pesticides, and it's done. I don't think it can go beyond that.
quite a lot for some households.
Some model-
Depends,
some
because
model that
the
needs to
households
be-
are not the same in the way they
No,
manage
I'm looking at an
themselves.
average. I'm taking really average minimum, and then maybe
So
with
could be
a...
looking at a modern household.
No, I come from Bushenyi, really, for heaven's sake. Bushenyi was at one time regarded, during UPC days, as a model district. So, if my estimation of smaller things and what, it's UPC, which spoiled us. But,
Oh, yeah, fantastic.
no, Bushenyi people really...
No,
but
the-
of course,
the
it's
tip-top-
not
the
every,
tip-top
it's not every
French
house.
toast, yes.
But people are really not so
bad,
much in a
she's
crisis.
boasting.
But no, I'm not boasting.
In a good
I've been to other districts in this country. I've been to other districts in this country and I know what happens. So yes, so to me, if this was in Bushenyi, this would be really the bare minimum you can do for interventions of medium. Because there are others who don't need your intervention, of course. But still, you cannot do much with this kind of money. And my point is that this is a laughable investment.
To help your context, actually, Sophie, what Sarah is also saying, on average, you're the figures lady. You know, on average, we are telling Ugandans, how much does an average Ugandan need for a startup?
Yeah. Yeah, how much can it be?
An average Ugandan, because
you know, and this is why the previous programs failed. Bonava Bagagaware, Intandikwa, you are saying Bonava Bagagaware, you lend me 500,000. It will end in food and medicine, and in 2 months I will not have money. And this is why citizens have not even been able to pay back and recycle this money. I was in Teso when cows were taken to Teso, and people were crying, saying the cows are looking for food, and the people are looking at them, maybe they should eat them. Yes, because, you know, all these interventions are not well thought out, and they cannot make impact to the ordinary citizen. So when you look at really what we need to do, in simple terms, cut your coat according to your size. Our revenue is 22 trillion estimated. But we also know that it might not reach this because of COVID effects. People have lost jobs, people have lost businesses, shopping arcades in town are closing. We have seen coverage of these things on TV. People have no food in their homes. So what are you going to tax from them? Above 80% of our taxes in these countries are indirect taxes, whereby you pay as you consume. So when people have no purchasing power, and you are not creating conditions for enabling purchasing power parity, how do you collect the indirect taxes? If I used to purchase fuel of 50,000 a day, and I now drive on Saturday for convenience and I use taxi, are you going to get that tax on fuel? No. And this is what is happening. So can we be realistic and cut our coat according to our size, but also look at short-term, medium-term interventions that can help revive the economy and increase and expand the tax base?
Indeed, and then some just before we come, just two very quick, obvious things. On energy, Kampala alone, yeah? The amount of wastage, the amount of loss of business and productivity, economic productivity for these, that people lose as a result of power blackout. It's better this week than it was 3 weeks ago. Just something as basic as that. Because it's real in businesses and people's livelihoods.
And the time we lose in traffic jam.
And Sarah, how could you spoil? Okay, you're from Ochieno, I'll spare you for that. But fantastic. No, that's fantastic, because the next other one, the quote, man hour without prejudice, meaning the human hour lost. You know, have you seen it headline? Next time, ask Mr. Museveni whether he has an idea what man hour lost is. Lost in traffic. Some of these are things that can be fixed like but of course they need UPC. That's why they say sometimes they want to try and kiss, they want to try and kiss UPC indirectly. No, some of these are common sense things, you know. So there you go to short.
Sophie, do you think really we can, because sometimes you see we borrow on ventures that never take off, yeah? You're talking about that, and these even take over 10 years. Do you think it's a question of poor planning or something?
Sometimes it could be poor planning, but sometimes it's not from our side. It could be from whoever we are borrowing from. The procedures that are taken to complete, it's just like when you go to your bank and you want to get a loan. It's not, yes, many of them will tell you within 24 hours you have the loan. But in real terms, you have to put your documentation together, show them this is how I'm working, this is how I expect to get the money, and I hope to pay back within this time. The same happens even when you're borrowing across countries. There are terms that we need to follow. If we are ready to do that, if we have our, let me call it documentation, and I know sometimes it's more than that, but if we have all that in place, then we are able to get what we want in time. Or sometimes it's they would want something in return. You know, some of these come with conditions that we need to fulfill. And at times it's negotiations. No, we can do this much, no, do this much. Those all take up time. So the time the money comes to you, because when we sign, it's not a click and the money is there direct. You get, let me just use an example. You're on a plane, you have to come back. The time you get home, the money is already wired and you start implementation. There is quite a number of things that need to be done, the procurement processes, and unfortunately sometimes we've not done the feasibility studies before and we think of doing them. All those have been affecting us in paying these loans or utilizing these loans efficiently. And government right now is seeing the loopholes and they're trying to close them. Start the procurement early. If the loan is within our mandate, if we say as Uganda we're going to borrow, let us prepare ourselves well. But then there are situations where it's not our intent to borrow. That means we might not be ready. When does that happen? The World Bank might come to you and tell you, you're not doing well in your education programs. And we have some money here that can go to education. It might look rosy. For example, if someone came to me right now and they were giving me money for education with what we are going through in COVID and the situation that is going through, you might accept it. But then you're accepting it without thinking about what you need to prepare to be able to utilize it fully the way you should utilize it. So some of those are the gaps that come through and fail us from utilizing our loans well within the stipulated time. For some that we've been prepared for, we've been able to achieve well. But then where you have those situations and you start working backwards, it sets you up. And yet you have signed. So we've signed for the World Bank. Let me use that example still. If we've signed for the World Bank loan that they've given to us for education, the World Bank will start calculating its interest. But you have to set your house together. You're going to go back, prepare, okay, we need to have, let me use the example of the curriculum. If they've given us money to change our curriculum, we need to start, who is going to train, what are we going to do, what do we want to change it to, how many people are going to bring in. With this money, we're not able to cater for all teachers. We can only cater for 500 teachers. Okay, where are we sampling these 500 teachers from? So all that preparation is going on. It's not going to be done within a month. It might be done sometimes years.
So is it?
And before you know it, you start 3 years into the project, you're already paying money.
So is it that you first have to, the government looks for whatever sums of money, then they start planning for what they, they should
that's
start
why I
from
get the examples.
They know how much
There's somewhere we prepare ourselves, we do the feasibility study, we need a road here, to improve, there's too much traffic, there's too much traffic in Tinda side. What is the problem? There's so many potholes, the drainage is poor, we need to work on it. They do the preparations, the engineers do their work, and they say we need this much to work on this road, it will take this long, we are ready. We go, who are we going to get money from? And we identify whoever we are borrowing from, we go and present to them our issue and what we want. There are those situations that once you're prepared well,
Bottom up,
we could
planning.
be able to
So we also have the top bottom. We have the top bottom.
Exactly. But then, when someone comes and gives you an opportunity, there is something here. Usually they look rosy. You know your education is going to be worked on within, by a click, once you take this money. You decide to take it. And unfortunately, when you take it, you realize that we've not prepared, we've not done this. There is a lot to do. That becomes the problem.
Okay.
So it all goes back to preparation. Yes. For us to be more prepared and demand, and also for us to be able to say no to some of these situations when they come. Maybe give us time, we think through it, see, is it necessary now? You can easily say no, but I don't know if our government knows how to say no to our donors. You're giving me this, but no, please hold on. In 5 years, we can discuss it.
Yes, and maybe before Ochieno comes in, a quick one, I think, rejoin that what Sophie is saying.
Yes.
We saw the example of Magufuli refusing some of these loans. And that shows us that it's possible. Yeah, it's possible, yeah. But also on the same example of the late Magufuli, and why we are running away from IMF, World Bank, and going to the commercial lenders, as well as people like China, which operate like our quack money lenders in town. You have conditions for accessing normal borrowing from these international agencies, including observance of human rights. So as our governance takes a downward trajectory on human rights, on key governance issues, then you cannot sit on a table with such credible institutions who care about the welfare of the citizen that you are brutalizing. So that has also contributed to our running away from normal concessional borrowing to money quacks and commercial lenders in this country.
Yeah, you see the crisis we have in governance. You see the crisis in governance we have. Sophie obviously is not a politician.
No,
Sophie is a fantastic technocrat.
Yeah, of course.
And what she said, the best we can interpret for us, how we do it, is that this business where you have a state that actually follows global money like zombies is part of the problem. The last UPC government, first of all from our manifesto, it's very deliberate, it's not about UPC, but we had a manifesto. But beyond then our manifesto, once we came into government in 1981, we had a program. This country, this is official, Uganda had the first structural adjustment program, SAPS, with IMF and World Bank. Yes. Sophie knows that. Before then, Ghana. But you know what? Our SAPS was our SAPS. I was on our terms. Milton Obote is a fantastic guy, you know? This is what we said. This is the country we left in 1970, before Idi Amin, before you helped to bring him. This is the country that Amin has tortured with your help. This is the country we found. This is where we want to go, Sophie. These are key priority areas: rehabilitation, health, education, things like that. This is what we think we can afford, we're going to generate. This is where you can support us grants. And this sort of is where you can lend us. But all of it were on our terms. 1980 on our terms. As a government mandated by...
Was the Common Man's Charter still in place?
No, actually, the Common Man's Charter was not even there. The Common Man's in the 60s. This is now 1980. Sarah, this was when we softened up and simply say we're going to mix economic programs where government would work in partnership with industry. Sarah, a fantastic program, you know, it was, and still is. That program enabled us between 1981 and 84 for Uganda to see the first ever rise in the standard of living since 1970. But there's something else I'm trying to say here. We had a 10-year program that included universal primary education by 1991. Fellow citizens, watch this, you know? We performed so well between 1981 and 84 that we had a complete turnaround of the economy. And you know what? OECD countries came to us and said, look, you've done so well that you've got this thing called universal primary education that is part of your program. You know, you could implement it in 1986, Sarah. Obote said, nope. We are sticking to our 10-year program. Now, Obote, I was lucky, he told me this, you know, fairly, very directly. We said no to OECD guys for starting UPE that was even boasts about. This UPE is not as UPE from the bush, it's UPE by the New World Order kind of stuff, you know, which came under bangled. Our UPE was supposed to have started in 1991, where no other African country was providing for universal primary education. But this is the take. When I said, look, Joe, I said no. We were sticking to our 1991, not 1986. And these guys were prepared to give us some help, by the way. And this is the point I'm trying to make. We're sticking to our program because we knew we had opened up third world schools. So we're going to have enough teachers. We're going to have enough classrooms. We're going to have enough scholastic materials. We're going to have enough money to pay them. And so therefore we're going to maintain standards. That's a country. That's a government. That's your own household. You're in charge. This was the program. So by 1991, we would have started with UPE, where it was as competitive as the schooling that I actually had without the 300 children and the tree. And our school now is heavily commercialized. Meaning, all these other things, I've used education as an example, meaning all these things can be done and planned, but that's when you have a government that drives for the people, not for their individual interests.
Thank you. Your manifesto is dissecting it here. So, Sarah, Sarah, about the 2000 there, Uganda's external indebtedness was nearly scrapped off by the IMF and World Bank. I think cancellation program for poorly and highly indebted countries. Yes. And now it's over 18 years. We are going back into that.
No.
What is the issue? We don't learn or something?
Yes, thank you, Demian. Uganda has benefited from the debt cancellation twice under Museveni's government. And we go in to beg for debt cancellation under that description of poor and highly indebted countries. But when we come back home, we boast of economic growth, economic, stability. So we need to harmonize the language and stop confusing the citizen. One day you are economically stable, steady progress, you mention figures, 3.1% growth, you don't mention how you are calculating that growth. Then the next day you are announcing debts, you are highly indebted, poor, and you don't mind going to the world to beg as a poor and highly indebted country while boasting of economic progress back home. So what kind of progress are we talking about? Is it a negative progress? I know in terms of peace, you can have negative peace and then normal peace. So are we talking of negative economic progress? What is this steady progress? And I think a student needs to understand these things. So we in that accord, I think, and it's quite disturbing that our country behaves like a spoiled child in a family. Every day you have exorbitant, costs. You want this shopping, you want, because if you have been forgiven of debt 18 years, and you are talking of consistent economic progress as a country, I think it used to be at 5.1 before COVID, according to the figures. But we also know that when we sit here as citizens and ask ourselves where this economic growth, can be traced, you can hardly trace it. Because in our wallets, you might be among the Raka Ugandans. Because most of our wallets as Muntu Awansi, really you cannot trace this economic growth that happens per year. So if you have an economy that has grown steadily for 35 years at 5.1%, why are you then again moving into a debt crisis, debt cancellation, and you are again categorized as a highly indebted country? What kind of progress are we talking about?
When you can't even provide
that
basic
can't
services.
match. That can't match. That, because if you look at a 44.7 trillion budget and you can only raise 22, so you can only cover 50% of your costs. And we need to bring this debate home. It's like in a family, when you don't have money, which happens to all normal families except the supernormal and highly connected, politically connected countries. And you've run out of cash, cash, your cash flow is low as a family. I think we all know what we do at our family level. You cut down what you consume. Expenses, look at the basics. If you've been having eggs for breakfast, you take them out. You look at milk for children. You look at adults taking dry tea. The mitigation factors that we do in our homes when we run out of cash. Why can't we apply them at the national level? You have a country amidst COVID, you are creating districts, you are creating constituencies, yet you know the impact of COVID and the economy is in lockdown. So why can't I call you a spoiled child?
Sophie, I would want you to weigh in on this one.
First, I'll start with a bit of growth and debt.
Economic progress.
You can have economic growth when you have debt, when you're borrowing. And that happens world
Do you
over.
have a balance sheet? When you go to a balance sheet, because in simple economics, when you go to a trial balance, expenditures, incomes, so where is your balance sheet? Is it in negative? Is it in positive? I think we need to
It might not
simplify
balance.
these things for
It might not balance, but you can borrow to help you grow.
No, we don't have a dispute with that. But I'm so sorry. But what
No,
Sarah
I'm
was
just-
also saying
I'm just
that over
clarifying.
say a period of
Yes,
10 years,
from Sarah,
a
yes.
government should have the idea that, well, part of the key indices is how much we reduce our debts. Look around the world. That's what nation states, normal nation states do. Yes.
And that is why, for many years, Uganda has been making an effort to see that our debt is low. Unfortunately, it's growing at a fast rate now, which is threatening. But we can have progress while borrowing. Many countries do. It's how
So
do
it's
you...
negative growth.
No. No, Sarah, no. That is how... No, let's go back. You use the example.
You're protected. Yeah, go on.
Thank you.
Yes.
You use the example of a family.
Yes.
And families still go and borrow
Yes.
to help them with their
Cash
income.
flow. Yeah.
To supplement actually on their cash flow. And that helps them also grow. It's how you use it. It would not be feasible for you to borrow and then
Go to
use
that
the
beach
money
every day.
to buy children chips and chicken every day. You want to use it to bring you
On
more money.
productivity.
Exactly. You invest it. So that's how the growth can be there when you're borrowing, because you're investing it to bring you more money.
And that's
I'm
what
just saying
qualifies as
clarity on that.
sustainable debt.
That sustainability is an issue also. How do you manage? So it goes back to the discussions we had before: wastage, appetite. What are we spending this money on that we are borrowing for? But it's unfortunate we see a bit of growth. It's not the growth that we would want as a country. We've not reached the 7% that we would want to have or more. For this financial year, at least we are growing at about 3.1, which is actually lower than before, but we expect it to grow in the next financial year. But how do you keep it? I think the main issue is continuously growing, keeping growing, and that growth that we talk about, if we are growing as a country, being reflected in an ordinary citizen's pockets.
Yeah.
I think that's where the gap is. That is where the problem is. And that goes back to closing some of these loopholes. I like using the example of agriculture because it relates to us directly. If I have my maize. If I know I'll take it to the market, I will sell it at 500, 1,000 shillings and not at 200 shillings. I'm comfortable because I know I'm going to sell it and get money back. Where Uganda as a country is now, that bit is missing a bit. Yes, someone will tell you, go into planting of maize. You're going to plant your acre, let me use, if it's a 4-acre model,
Yeah, yes.
you plant your 4 acres of maize, and then it comes June, July, you're harvesting, and you go to the market and they tell you, I'm giving you 200 shillings per kilo. So you start thinking, that's
Will I get my money?
way less than what I've spent.
Yeah.
That becomes the issue. And those are things that right now government should look into.
Are you
Things,
suggesting
having things like, let me call them warehouses.
and buffer stocks?
Have buffer stocks, yes, government investing in that. So that you're able to say, bring your maize here. Let me maintain you at the price you expected before.
The market.
So that my farmer, as a country as Uganda, the Ugandan farmer is not affected.
Yes.
I think that's where the gap has been for government, to support this farmer and keep him at that level of he plants 3 months before and he knows he's going to get 1,000 shillings per kilo that he's selling for, and he knows he has that assurance from government that I will take my maize here and sell it and get this much. That disconnect has been there, where these are areas that government should come in to protect, let it buy the stock that this farmer has, take the burden of the farmer. And then after a period of time, maybe the maize has gone down, keep that price, keep the supply, first of all, is there because we've kept the maize and it's been kept well, so that we don't have the issues of aflatoxins and all. And you're able to keep the produce at the same level. The farmer is happy, the producer of maize flour, Maganjo, is happy because they have the constant supply of the maize to produce the flour, and also the ordinary citizen is able to buy and consume.
And consume
So,
a healthy product.
a healthy product, yes.
Yes.
So keeping that channel moving that way, because it's a chain, keeping the chain going the way it should is necessary. And that's when it will reflect better into one's
Yeah,
pocket.
Demian, if I may come in briefly after Sophie, before you, Ochieno tells us this is what UPC government was.
And we would, yes. With them.
You know,
Man is laying
you
out
know,
his
under the cooperative movement, this is what existed.
Fantastic.
That is a UPC.
Precisely under the cooperative movement, there were, I think, 4 key areas of support to a farmer. One was the agriculture extension services to ensure there is healthy production, including outputs. Because I still remember that agriculture extension workers used to come to my home when I was a child. And as much as my parents could, in a way, afford whatever they needed for their farming, but would still get free services from the agriculture extension workers. And that went in even up to the late 1980s, even before the complete collapse of agriculture extension work and cooperative movement. But under the cooperative movement now, after the agriculture extension workers ensured that there was healthy production and support to a farmer, the cooperative movement would come in to control the harvest. Quality control at harvest level is very important. Storage facilities is very important, but they were also buffer stock, controlling the prices, as much as credit facilities. So the farmer would take their produce to a collection center at a parish and get a form, a receipt, that would serve as credit security in financial services. And that's where agriculture was a true backbone of our economy. But now you still have 80% of our people stuck in agriculture as a sector for so many reasons, including lack of employment for people who are even educated. And we also saw recently the percentage of graduates driving borders, because there is no economy to absorb them. There is a mismatch between education and the outputs coming out of education vis-a-vis the economic capacity to absorb these graduates, quality notwithstanding. Because we also have debates on the quality of education. But even quality and quantity, there is no absorption. No. That is carry stock. You cannot produce people and say, I am producing this this capacity of citizens, and then they have nowhere to go. So you have an end product that is crashing in thin air, and then you call that progress. No, nations are not run like that. I think we need to go to the basics of nation building, citizen development, human security of the people, as well as full capacity utilization of the people.
Joseph, before we go to UPC, you see, are there policies, tax policies that can help reduce deficits, but also in a way help on socioeconomic challenges?
I think possibly almost like a repeat question. But, it's so nuanced that actually everything else we've just been talking about in the last few minutes are really very much about that. And Sarah's made it so fantastic. Price controls, by the state, agricultural subsidies for farmers. I'm just now using the broader terms, not to go round, and protection them, including, and what are some of the things that happens here? People get stranded with their maize and their beans. They get stuck, and then at the end of the season, or at the peak of the demand, rice comes from Pakistan, and some big guy in town, in charge, comes and just puts it a bit like whatever, and guys make the profit, and business continues, and the Ugandan sinks. It's just obvious common sense. So those are really the issues. Now, part of your question about whether or not the ways you could, mitigate some of these things, I'm not quite sure whether, I repeat, it's anything else that we could do beyond really what Sarah has told these people. I'm not going to mention the other part, at all. Is it just straightforward? The point is really, investing in agriculture is not about the numbers. There are qualitative elements to this. For me, in Agongera, I see when I was growing up, and I see the state of Nagongera, which is now a mini town, and I actually see day-to-day agricultural activities, including from members of my family, some of whom are grandchildren of my father, and so they're basically there, and they're actually literally idle, and you see what they do on a day-to-day basis. They're absolutely stranded, have no future, and have no hope. For me, part of my continued conversations, every time I think this country big, and I think about where Uganda is within the context of broader Africa and the rest of the world, I also have to think about some of the realities that the people that I see around me. What is it that I can do to them? And in many cases, some of them are basically roles of government. The last time I saw an acre of maize, between Nagongera and Tororo, that was rather a bit of a long time ago. Of course, the people in Bushenyi have gone in and now things are to the end of it. That's how I said, thanks to UPC, as it were. But the broader experience that I'm referring to, Nagongera, is the bigger experience of the 80% Sarah is talking about, that are not only dependent on this, but they're completely helpless because of one, lack of direction, and lack of support from the state. Looking at the budgetary allocations, again, some of the things I was trying to talk about, training and skills, may not necessarily go under agriculture perhaps, but maybe it might go in skilling and equipping some of these guys. Some of the technical equipments like farm implements. I don't know. The problem we have in this country is lack of national direction. And, our fellow citizens might think that we're coming back around this thing because we want to make a particular point. Not actually. That point is exactly that point. This country genuinely has no national direction. The guys in charge, can you imagine, one party, if it's a political party, after 35 years, you have an idea, you experiment it, and you're running with it for 35 years. Nobody else is actually attempting to put an alternative program where Ugandan citizens have had at least 5 years, which is one parliament, that let's try this policy and party and see what they can do or whether or not their programs, their systems work. That has not happened in this country. So I think there is basically governance fatigue from a people who came to power who are possibly not necessarily ready. Some writers suggest that they stumbled into power, but granted they took the power anyway. But at the moment it's less about that, but much more about genuine national determination, which Sophie really, really pleads that she wishes things could work out beyond here, that we begin to have a budget that is balanced, a national debt that is sustainable, and an economic growth that is able to cater for the very needy majority of our citizens. And I'm not quite sure whether that is yet to happen. I'll be surprised. I'm waiting for Comrade Museveni next month when he pronounces in his new government how he creates the new national mood beyond the budgetary allocations, but perhaps how he engages in terms of bringing our people together. Because that matters, national harmony, cohesion, and that some of the people in this country, particularly those around major towns, can walk to work without fearing that they're going to be beaten simply because they're putting on red, which is UPC, but now, of course, been voted by other political parties.
You have to put in that. Okay. Sophie, can you really engage in this area so much? Any policies, tax policies that can reduce on the deficits, but also address the socio-economic challenges we have today?
Quick thoughts about some of the tax policies. Before I get to the tax policies, actually, working within, first of all, starting with URA itself, that is a tax collection body. There are gaps within URA that if we are relying on revenue as a country, we need to have that house operate at 100%. Efficiency, yes. URA has staffing gaps. It has administrative challenges. Our informal sector being as big as over 60%, if our revenue authority was working efficiently, it wouldn't be that high. So issues around, right now they're talking about the digital tax stamps, e-taxing. If you're talking about digital tax stamps, we had a discussion recently with some business operators, and government is taxing them. I'm saying government, meaning URA. They are asking, let me say asking, the business entities to purchase their digital tax stamps. If I'm buying my own digital tax stamp for something that I know that is going to affect my business, I'm sorry to say, but I might also get something that is not legit. Because I don't want to increase my costs.
Yeah.
This is something that government should take up. Government can't give a business person the onus, the
burden of responsibility.
Let me not call it a burden now. Let me not call it a burden. What should I say? The liberty to get its own tax stamp. It should get something that it knows this is, it can't be easily chopped. It's working efficiently. You'll use it. It's up to the standards. First of all, it's checked. If you have it, then you're working at the full scale that you should be. If you do not have it, you have to work towards getting it. That means you have to put your house in order. Come to me, I give it to you. So some of these gaps, before we go to the policies that will bring us bring money to us, we need to check our house and see how it's operating. When you talk to business people, especially those who import, if you try and talk to some who import within the region, they will tell you our taxes are the highest.
Yeah.
They are the highest. You face a number of challenges in terms of corruption, dealing with the officers. If we put our system in order, we'll be able to collect a bit more, and we'll be able to increase compliance in some areas. For our policies, it's unfortunate, I keep saying government is looking for the easy way out in terms of taxing, collecting taxes, going for the formal route and not looking at the informal route. First of all, looking at the informal route would mean understanding, why are you informal? What is causing you to be informal? We currently did a study on gender and taxation and realized people are informal, yes, but not because they want to be informal. In some instances, they just don't have the information. I don't know what TREP is. I don't know where I go for NIRA. I don't know what I need under URSB to register my business. If I'm to pay taxes, TIN number. Some people pay for the TIN number.
Yes.
It is supposed to be free.
Yes, and
It's basically an information provision process. Tell someone you started your business. Okay, today how many
bags did you sell? I sold 2. At what price? This much. Okay. How much did you buy those bags when you are bringing them? It's basically stock. This is out. This is what I've sold. Many don't know that. They know how to run a business, or have started a business. I'm getting this much, this much. But it's record keeping that is necessary. You need to keep your records. You need to register your business. To register your business, you need this much, this much, this much. So investing in some of these will help us get a bit more into our revenue. We've got, for policies, the country is doing well. We have, I mean, in terms of revenue, we have the domestic revenue mobilization strategy that is well laid out on how.
Is it working?
We're doing
How-
well on documentation.
Is it working?
That's what she meant.
It's well laid out
Well,
on
it's
how
there,
we
but-
can strategize to get our revenue within the next 5 years. We increase awareness, collect the taxes. There are tax bills that are brought out every year, and those tax bills really refine areas where we're trying to close the notches where there are gaps. But then how we collect, what we collect. I'll use an example of mobile money. Mobile money is a good venture because it's still here. Mobile money is a very good venture. Mobile money tax, not so good. And that, from the CSBAG perspective, our view was don't put the tax directly on the end user. Tax the interest that commercial banks hold, the money that commercial banks hold for the mobile money agents. Because to operate with mobile money, you must have an account. You gain, you put money, which they call float, in the bank. And that money gains interest, which goes back to MTN. If government puts a tax on that, yes, part of it will come back to the end user, because MTN is also out to make business. Airtel is out to make money. It will come back to the end user, but it will be shared. It will not be directly to my mother or my grandmother in the village who have sent money, who have sent 50,000 shillings, and she ends up getting 58. Yet she expects to pay a medical bill of 50. Sorry, she ends up getting 48. Yet she expects to pay a medical bill of 50,000. That would not be there. Some of these policies that are brought through affect the end user, and in the end affect government in its collection. We used to collect a lot of money from mobile money. I'm sorry, I can't remember the figures offhand right now. But then, right now, someone will tell the person in the village, hey, go to a mobile money agent and get money off my account. That getting money off my account, yes, I'm going to be charged, and government will still get money from the tax. But what government is forgetting in that chain is it was going to get money from me. It was going to get money from the person I'm sending to, and it was going to get money when that person is withdrawing from the agent. So there were 3 channels. When I tell the person, go to the mobile money agent, you're reducing those channels and getting from probably 1. So, yes, there are easy ways. Government right now, it looks like is looking at the easy ways to collect taxes. But then at one point, we need to sit down and think through and answer the hard questions. Where are we not taxing? And how should we get into that? It might be costly getting that, how do we tax those areas, but it will bring revenue back to the country. Reducing the informalities is one area that I'll emphasize, because some people, it's not that they're all informal. There are some who start formal, but they see the taxes going higher and higher and higher on them, and they're like, but why am I the one paying tax? So they see ways of evading. A former employee right now will tell you they pay as you earn, but then they go to, it's okay to pay as you earn, but then let me be able to get 50,000 and I'm able to get my household items at a go. These days, you look at what you've purchased with 50,000 and you can't understand it. You can't understand it. Now, for a person who goes through that, it will be hard to encourage them to pay their taxes favorably. Yet they should. So government needs to think through how do we go the hard way, to the hard bits that we're not collecting taxes from, and see how best to collect the revenue.
Thank you very much, Sophie. And now that we are concluding, I need to request that at least each of us gives their parting shots. And Sarah, you'll go first.
No, I want to build the debate from where Sophie has stopped. Because maybe there's tax apathy in the country, if I may use the governance terms. And as a citizen, appreciate the purpose of paying tax. You know, tax serves two purposes. One is service delivery, but the second one is, and the driver for that, the trust within the people and the common good and general stability in the country. The presence of government that a normal citizen feels today is either tear gas or chiboko. Because when they go to the hospitals, there is no medicine, including during COVID. You know, COVID medicines for mitigating the effect of COVID, they also ran out, and people were buying their own. So what is the interaction of a citizen with this government? You go to a hospital, there is no medicine. Some hospitals, there is no doctor and even equipment. It's a building. And a building does not qualify to be called a hospital. A hospital must have health workers. A hospital must have health equipment as well as medicine. So once you put up a building in the name of health center 3, health center 4, it is not a hospital, please. Come on. A hospital must have the requirements. So, when the citizen goes to interact with education, in the name of universal primary education, universal secondary education, what do they find? They are paying more money than even before UPA existed. Look at the budget provision of UP. It used to be 7,000 per child per year. What can you do with that money? And then you boast around that you are providing free education. Who can study for 7,000? What kind of education is that in a year? So the interaction of a current citizen today with the government is brutality. We see tear gas, we see fire, we see chiboko, we see drones. So what is the motivation to pay tax? I think we need to have that debate. How does a common man interact with the government? And what do they see beyond the titles of a honorable MP and a huge vehicle? It is brutality. So does this motivate a citizen to pay? Or it makes a citizen try to find ways of evading tax? I think it is the other way around. So we need to have a responsible government that a normal citizen can connect with and have ownership and know that the leadership is accountable in order to motivate people to pay tax.
I want to, in 1 minute.
Demian, it can only be merely a summary of what we say, and partly what Sarah has just said, that all we need is a situation in which it is possible for citizens of this country to have sufficient trust in the authorities, meaning the government and whoever represents them, whether the nearest local services, that whatever monies they pay for them, are value for money. We get guys, if you get guys at the top who present themselves as you are their servants, when they really should be your servants, and they are there in those big, huge vehicles and everything else, including the aircrafts, which is basically our money, and they're using it, the citizens have got a right to question, including whether or not it's actually worthy for them to be able to do that. In fact, these days, one of the things that Ugandans are including beginning to do is very desperate, including some of those areas which suffered NRA terror, particularly in the north and east. People now begin to say, what is it that we can also now get? It's about that, out of this, rather than how much can I contribute to this nation state. Number two, very quickly, I think it's also about targeted taxation is possible, which part of what Sophie was talking about. And then number 3, who are the people paying taxes and what are they paying for? And then number 4, I think, on that one particularly, these big corporations of the MTNs of this world, I have issues with them, just as including the banks, the commercial banks, the huge interest rates, the amount of money, the price of money that Ugandans pay basically to borrow, the price the Ugandans pay just to withdraw their own money, the price they even pay to save. We built Uganda Commercial Bank for you guys, but then you dumped it. Just think about it and be ashamed. But, I just want to use one public organization and I have authority as a citizens forum to suggest. Uber, Uber takes 25% from the people who drive us around, directly. And part of the question is, should these guys take 25% from our citizens? Granted, some of the services of some of these guys are not particularly good, but the nation state, the government, our parent organization, meaning the government, that schemes with these guys, should be able to say that if you're a company, foreign company that is coming to Uganda, you're not going to rip off our end users, you're not going to rip off our drivers, you're not going to rip off our streets, you're not going to pollute our streets and take out the 25%. I suggest simply take 25, say 10%, arguably. Can you imagine? The other 10% could actually go to government, and then the other 5% is a relief to the end user. Common sense, strategic thinking. That's what we need to do. But as I said, these guys have got, in one case, no clue, but generally I think by and large they have no interest. I think, finally, the more Ugandans actually have a debate and a conversation around these issues, question about taxation, and the more Ugandans actually know that this trillion shillings they were talking about are their money, and the burdens, whether they like it or not, their children and grandchildren are going to pay for it, the more likely possibly they're able to put pressure on the guys who pick our money at will at the national coffers and misuse them, and maybe the more responsible we shall be having people using our money, meaning borrowing and basically saving or investing on our behalf.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Finally, Sophie, you began the debate. You can end it in 1 minute.
Thank you. And I want to start from where Joseph has ended. For us as citizens to, one, pay our taxes as we should, but also follow up on what our money is doing. Once we start asking the difficult questions, why are we buying airlines when we should be putting drugs in our health centers, when we should be improving UPE, these questions will ensure that government provides services as it should, because it knows it's in check from some end. And that leads me to my second point about having prudent public financial management. When we come together as citizens and check these services, sometimes we will see a road was constructed poorly. We don't actually need to know the knowledge of the engineer that it should have a drainage. Sometimes if it's just as much as maintaining a road, why would you maintain and leave the grass all grown? You're going to slash the area, work on the road itself, remove the rubbish, make sure that drainages are working well. Something as simple as that. You see it, report it. Let us know where these offices are, and let us work with the officials at the local government level and be able to air out some of these issues. When government sees that most of this is being looked at critically by the citizens, they will check themselves. But also to government, some of these wastages and the prioritization is necessary, right? Especially now that our resources are really, really meager. It is necessary for us to see what can we do now and what can wait. It's not like everything has to happen now. No, because this is bringing an implication on us for the next generation. We are borrowing partly because we are not able to phase out some of our investments, and most of these are really, really high and costly, which are affecting us. Then moving to our debt discussion that got us off from the start. Borrowing is good, yes, but then let us check what we are borrowing for and prepare very well for whatever we are going to borrow for. Let's do the feasibility studies in time. Let us think through where we are going to borrow from, what levels of interest. Let us, for government, this is a call. Let it operate like it's doing a business. A businessman will think through what it is, what he or she is doing before he takes a decision. Is it going to bring, how much return on investment is this going to bring? Should I borrow now or I hold on and borrow later? Is this the best time to borrow? Is this the best person to borrow from? But then also looking at some of these projects that are operating. It's absurd when we get to know that we've borrowed money and then there are projects that are not performing. It hurts a taxpayer. Let me now think in terms of a taxpayer because I'm one of them also. It hurts to know that your money is being put to waste. Let us close these loopholes. Government should look into some of these. The public investment management has to be at the top notch for what we do. When we think of borrowing, let us think through what we are borrowing for and be able to look into achieving a higher return on our investments, especially for debt. When we do some of these, I'm sure we'll get to a point and also reduce our appetite for borrowing, but also our expenditure, because that's what's taking us to the borrowing in the first place. Our revenue is there. I keep saying we are not poor as a country. I think we collect quite a lot, but how we use it is the main issue. We lose out a lot in management, but also in utilization of this money.
Thank you very much, Sophie. We are not poor as a country, like she says. Thank you very much, Joseph Ochieno, for actually coming through at the short notice. You were able to honor the invitation. Also, thank you, Sarah. Yes. Thank you, Sarah, for always constantly being with us as a regular panelist and sharing your thoughts. Yeah, there's been a debate out there over Sarah is all over me. But thank you very much for ensuring that you share these thoughts with the people. And also to our dear citizens out there who are following this show, thank you very much for following. Thank you very much for being with us. Your reactions, your comments move this show. And for you here at the Citizens Chat Show, kindly ensure to follow this conversation on the Citizens Chat Show. And this is a Chat Show UG on the hashtag. We can do better as a country. Uganda is possible. Thank you.